So, Michael, just going back to the beginning of your story with the Beatles, you talked even last night about how you first met them when you worked on the Hey Jude video. So, coming into the Let It Be project, what was your relationship with them like at that time?
Well, actually, I'd met them before in 1966 when they asked me to do Rain and Paperback Writer.
Right.
And then we did Hey Jude and Revolution, which was a step up for all of us just because it was Hey Jude is such a great song and Revolution is such a great song. And then also later in 1968, I'd done the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus. And John was on the show, and with Eric Clapton and Mitch Mitchell and Keith Richards, super group, super band, and he and I got to be more friendly uh, when he was on the Rock and Roll Circus because he was sort of more on his own then. And so when I came to work with the Beatles in 1969, I'd already had experience with them, and we all kind of got on. And I thought, since Paul and John had asked me to do what was going to be a concert, which was how Let It Be began, that they trusted me. And I knew that they didn't trust a lot of people, except their intimate circle of the nine people came down from Liverpool in the initial onslaught of the Beatles. Brian Epstein, Peter Brown, Mal, Neil, Tony Bramwell, before them. Um, and so I felt at ease with them because it wasn't all that easy to feel at ease with them because they were so famous, so intelligent, so talented, and they also had their own private jokes, that they were very insular. Because as Ringo said, only the four of us will ever know what it was like. And so that bond, and he's really talking about the explosion in 1963, 64, the Ed Sullivan Show, that it made them so tight as a foursome, as well as the fact they're so fabulous writing songs and performing. Anyway, so to answer your question is I didn't feel excluded by them. I felt that I could say to them what I thought was right for them. And if they accepted the idea, good. And if they didn't, then we'd move on. So I felt good with the relationship.
Now, we learned from the Get Back film that your original idea for how you wanted the concert was this huge, epic Tripoli experience. What was your vision for that? Because that sounded so fantastic. And then how close did you get to having, getting them to sign on to doing it?
So close, so close.
So close.
When they asked me to do a concert with them, we began when we started working at Twickenham with several ideas. Ringo thought, well, maybe we should do it at the Cavern and honor that first place for them. And I said, yeah, but it's too small for what I think the world wants now for a Beatles concert. And also because Hey Jude was a very influential experience for them because I don't know if you've seen the video, but there's the Beatles doing Hey Jude, and then once the chorus comes in, a crowd forms itself
Ooh.
around them, and of 250, 300 people. And it was the first time they'd played to any kind of audience since 1966. And what was more important was that in the breaks, when the tapes were being re-put on the video machines, they had nothing to do except play for the people in the room. They were sitting in their rostrum, play. Actually, they played Buddy Holly and Tamla Motown's songs they loved. And they got a big buzz out of playing to people again. And that's what made them think they could do a concert again. It all goes back to Hey Jude. So then I'm thinking, well, if we're going to do a Beatles concert, what what do I think a Beatles concert should be? And I think a Beatles concert should be a historic event. And so we'd found this amphitheater on the coast of the Mediterranean, and it was a melting pot in the world just because it was located. Um, Arabs, Blacks, American service base, uh, people from other countries, obviously mothers, children, stuff like that. So I had this idea that we'd start it when the sun rose, and Mal would start to lay out the instruments. We'd see it slowly build as the sun gets higher, and the Beatles would come out and start to play, start to warm up, and gradually the music would start to float across the desert. And I had this idea that it would be like musical notes floating into the sky and then landing in whatever community I wanted them to land in, whether it was a small Black village or an American service base. And gradually and slowly, all the people would start to come across the desert and into the amphitheater, which was 2,000 years old. And so by the time we were doing Long and Winding Road or Let It Be at midnight with torches, the amphitheater would be filled by the Beatles and the world. That was the idea. Pretty good too.
I love that. I mean, it builds on the Hey Jude and the All You Need Is Love with the international broadcast. It does feel like a massive next step. It would have been amazing.
I got very close because there's one afternoon we're talking about it, and they're all kind of have signed on. And so I said, in Peter's picture, I said, okay, so we're going to do this, right? And then they say, yeah, we're going to do it. And then John says, but we can change our mind in the morning.
Not what you want to hear.
Now,
Nope. That's a big thing to organize. So, what you did end up doing was the rooftop concert, obviously. And, to me, watching it again last night in the Let It Be context, it's such a remarkable piece of documentary filmmaking to me, because not only do you have the Beatles playing this historic concert of new music, but you have all of the people, you have cameras placed everywhere to capture all these things. And then you have this unexpected police presence. And you managed to capture all these small moments with Mal, with the amp, with them, arguing during Get Back while Paul's still singing. And I'm wondering what that was like from your perspective to be able to organize something so comprehensive and then have something unexpected like that happen in real time.
well, it was unexpected, but perhaps predictable, because Savile Row, where the Beatles building was, is mainly a block of all the finest high-end men's tailoring shops. Also, there are, as well as tailoring shops, there's places which sell bolts of fabric and tweed and stuff like that. And so I thought there's a good chance that some of the older established firms might get pissed off because they're saying we're disturbing their business or something like that, and call the police. Now that there was a police station up the road. It wasn't like they're going to be flying in from Liverpool. They were just up the road. And so the one thing I like to claim credit for is in the lobby of Apple, lobby of the building, I built a little hut with a two-way glass in it, so I could put a camera in the little hut, and he could see through, and they wouldn't know it was there, which is how we were able to get the policemen kind of wandering around in the lobby while we were playing music up on the top. And in a funny way, it does make the movie more idiosyncratic that suddenly the Beatles are being busted by the police. And then also you see, as you're mentioning, how they react individually, because Mal had made a deal, because the police told Mal they were going to arrest him. And he'd made a deal with the police that the Beatles would only do one more song. And so by the time we get up on the roof with the police, Mal has told the police he's going to do one more song, but he hadn't told the Beatles that. And so then he goes over and unplugs George's amp. And then George says, what are you doing? And Mal said, well, the police. And George, they're all they're all so tough and rebellious. And George plugs the amp in again, and
This brilliant moment.
his guitar becomes live again. And then John wasn't sure what to do, but Paul, who it's very, very hard to buck Paul McCartney. And so he's the one that keeps on singing and inventing new lyrics to Get Back. Your mother's on the roof, she's gonna have you arrested. And it's when we and also if we'd scripted the Roof concert, who would have come up with the idea of John Lennon saying at the end, "I'd like to thank so and so, and I hope we passed the audition."
No, it's better than scripted. You couldn't get
Iconic.
there.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a little bit ago, obviously we want to talk about Peter Jackson in the midst of all this because he obviously, last in 2022 with Get Back has really kind of changed the game here. But one of the moments that I think you even mentioned last night, Michael, was the flower pot conversation and something that you said that, you sort of just thought it was knives and forks in the canteen, but he was able to bring out the whole conversation. So when you finally heard that clip come alive because of the Malk technology, what did you think when you heard that conversation between John and Paul?
Well, I thought at last, I thought the little idea I had to bug the flower pot, the flower vase really paid off, even if it paid off, 45 years later, because that conversation is incredibly revealing about how these two great artists, Paul McCartney and John Lennon, saw themselves in relation to each other, and also saw themselves in relation to George, who, as you know as well as most people, their friendship began when they were teenagers. That John was 16, Paul was 15. George, I think, was like 13 and a half, going on 14. And so the relationships were formed in those years. That John and Paul were the older kids, and John was and George was a slightly younger kid, and that influenced everything going forward as well. That particular relationship. Yeah, I mean, I was thrilled. Peter over there in New Zealand is he's not only a great director, and in my view, a great person. He's been we've formed a friendship because of the way he's treated Let It Be and advocated for Let It Be. But he's also a real tinkerer to do with how to make things better, to do with the machinery. And so the first thing he showed me was when we met in Los Angeles in 2018, just before he really started, he'd done a little work, and he showed me on his iPad a little clip from my version of Let It Be as it was then. It was the back of two Beatles looking at their hair. That was what he pulled up, and their hair was very clumped. And then he showed me what he'd been working on over in New Zealand in the next shot, and you could see strands of hair.
Wow.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so that's what Peter was already. Now, see, don't forget, he'd also done that wonderful movie called They Shall Not Grow Old,
That was
So good.
amazing. I
which
saw that
Yeah.
in 3D.
World War
Masterpiece.
One, and it was wonderful. And all the stuff that he'd learned there to do with bringing old footage to life again, and let alone putting voices in the men speaking, which they hadn't recorded at the time. I mean, I couldn't have gotten luckier, because also thing about Peter was he didn't want to take Let It Be away from me. He wanted to make his movie using my footage, and then at some point his movie would come out, and then in his view, in my view, then my movie would come out. So he was an advocate and a friend, and very respectful director to director.
I really feel
that's
that
great.
difference when we
And
watched it
I
last
really
night.
feel that
Let It
difference
Be
when
and
we
Get
watched it
Back are
last
such
night.
different
Let It Be
films.
and
They
Get
have
Back are
different
such different
characters. I know
films.
that
They have different
I think Peter Jackson said he
characters.
never
I know
used
that
any of the same
I think Peter
exact
Jackson
footage
said
that
he
you
never
use,
used
so it's
any of the
completely
same
different
exact
movies in
footage
that
that you
respect.
used, so it's
But
completely
one thing I
different movies in
noticed
that
was that
respect.
I felt like the
But one
visual
thing I
character
noticed was
of
that
Let It
I
Be
felt like the
was
visual
somewhat
character
different
of
from the
Let It
visual
Be
character
was
of
somewhat different
Get
from the
Back.
visual
Was that in
character
my
of
imagination, or
Get Back.
was there some
in my
technical differences in
imagination,
the
or
way
was there some
they
technical differences
developed
in the
Let It
way
Be to change the
they
mood
developed Let It Be
from
to
what it was
change
like
the
in
mood
Get Back?
Well,
from what it was like in Get Back?
yes and no. I mean, because Peter had more time, he was able to take the story in slightly different directions and use, especially in the sequence in Get Back after George has left, and Peter has in Get Back, all of us sitting around wondering what we're going to do next. And is George going to come back? I mean, of course he was going to come back. He just, is pissed off and he went to see his family up in Liverpool. But Peter is able to chart the sort of a low point in the Beatles' feeling about each other and about the Beatles. I didn't use that middle bit because I had very little, and when I say I had very little input, I had very little problem with the Beatles and Let It Be. They'd come up into the cutting room every so often and say, "Yeah, it's kind of let me see a bit," and it was nice. Okay, like because I showed them a full rough cut and a fine cut. But the producer of Let It Be, Neil Aspinall, who had been one of the original people who came down from Liverpool, Neil had started by driving his van with the Beatles in the back of his van with their instruments to gigs. So they formed their friendship very early on. So I had cut a little bit in of them sitting around and talking, and it was kind of slightly gloomy the way it is in Peter's picture. Um, and Neil said, well, look, there are four. The movie starts with four Beatles, which it did, and it finishes with four Beatles, and you edited it with four Beatles. So do we really need this little bit of George leaving? So I thought because the brief on Let It Be was going to be the third picture in their three-picture deal with United Artists. So it was going to be a different kind of picture anyway than what Peter came up with, because I basically had an hour and a half to try to tell the story. And so I thought, yeah, that makes sense. And so we didn't put it in. And so that's partly because Peter had more time, and there was no. See, don't forget when I did Let It Be, the Beatles were still together, and uh, that was one of the problems it had at the beginning because um, when we released Let It Be, they'd broken up a month before, and so everybody thought, oh my God, it's the goodbye Beatles picture, and they were like um, uh, picking up things on the beach, like is this a bit of broken glass or is it a stone? Trying to read what was really happening with the Beatles at the time. What was really happening with the Beatles at the time is they were making an album as they had before. They were going in different directions as four individual people, but yet when they worked together and interacted with each other, they were four people who loved each other. I mean, that's what I've always wanted when Let It Be wasn't coming out, was that I thought, well, why shouldn't we be seeing that? Because that's what the movie's about. It's four people who love each other, starting to go in different directions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that really comes out for sure. And it's a wonderful way to put it too. Well, Michael, this has been amazing. I wish we had more time with you, but we could not let you go without addressing one of our very favorite topics, which is one of our favorite Beatles films that you directed, which is Two of Us.
We
And
love it. We talk about it all the time.
we literally do. And I have to tell you just a very quick story. I was in London over the holidays and I saw a play with Jared Harris, and I happened to see him afterwards. And I said, I just have to ask you about Two of Us because it's amazing. And he said, oh, I just started watching Get Back. And he's like, there's not enough Michael Lindsay-Hogg in it. That was his feedback. So,
Well, I love Jared. even before you told me that story.
Now you love it more.
Both of the two actors, Jared Harris, who played John Lennon, and Aidan Quinn, who played Paul McCartney, gave that movie their all. And they were nervous about playing those characters because they're so world famous. And Aidan, this is a funny story, Aidan especially, because he thought Paul McCartney was a great artist and he didn't want Paul McCartney to, let's say, see his portrayal and not like it. Okay. But he did it, and he did it beautifully. He then takes his family on a holiday over Christmas, I think, down to somewhere in the Caribbean. And he's just bringing his bags up to his room, and he looks across the sand and sees in the cabana coming down the steps, Paul McCartney.
Oh, no.
So the next day, Aidan's on the beach sitting on his towel, thinking about to go swimming. And then he's aware of a shadow over his shoulder. And then someone sits down beside him, and it's Paul, who said, I saw two of us. And he said, if I wasn't in it myself, but you did a great job being me.
Oh, that is the best
And
compliment.
that's great because you have an actor who commits himself entirely to playing the part, a little apprehension in case the person doesn't like him, and yet then the person was graceful enough to say, good job.
Oh, that's great. And Paul never changed his mind about that. There's a clip from a podcast that he did, I don't know, maybe 2020, where somebody mentioned two of us, and off the top of his head, oh, right, Jared Harris, Aidan Quinn, they were great. He knew it. He thought of it. He just loved it organically like that. So he still loves it.
Well, as we know, Paul is very talented and has got great taste.
Yes,
This
definitely.
is true. This is true. Well, thank you so much, Michael. This has been so much fun, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you again sometime.
Well, listen, this has been fun for me, Allison and Erica, and I'm good. Just get in touch with Jennifer or whatever, and we can do this again.